Sheikh Saadi of Shiraz. He who sleeps on the road will lose either his hat or his head. Nizami, Treasury of Mysteries. The Gulistan, Rose Garden, and Bustan, Orchard, of Saadi of Shiraz, 1184–1291, are two classics of Sufism which provide the moral and ethical basis of the reading of millions in India, Persia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Saadi was at times a wandering dervish, was captured by the Crusaders and made to dig ditches until ransomed, visited the centres of learning of the East, and wrote poetry and literature which has not been surpassed. He was educated in Baghdad at the great college founded by Nizam, the friend of Khayyam, and minister of court of the Shah. His affiliation was with the Naqshbandi order of Sufis, and he was closely associated with Sheikh Shahabuddin Suhrawardi, the founder of the Suhrawardi school, and also Najmuddin Kubra, the pillar of the age, one of the greatest Sufis of all time. Saadi's influence upon European literature is acknowledgedly very considerable. He is one of the group whose writings gave substance to the Gesta Romanorum, source book for many Western legends and allegories. Scholars have traced many of Saadi's influences in literature, such as that of Germany. Translations of his works are first found in the West in the 17th century. Like most other Sufi work, however, the interior meaning of Saadi is hardly known at all through his literary interpreters. A typical comment by a recent commentator shows this clearly. It is not so much an opinion of Saadi as an indication of the mind of the author. It is exceedingly doubtful whether he was a Sufi by temperament. In him the didactic subordinates the mystic. In actual fact, the cautionary tales, rhymes, soulful analogies used by Saadi are multifunctional. On the ordinary level, they do indeed contribute toward the ordinary stabilization of ethic. But Professor Codrington, almost alone among Western commentators, sees deeper. The allegory in the Gulistan is particular to Sufis. They cannot give their secrets to those who are unprepared to receive or interpret them correctly, so they have developed a special terminology to convey these secrets to initiates. Where no words exist to convey such thoughts, special phrases or allegories are used. It is not in the West alone that people expect esoteric knowledge to be handed to them upon a plate. Saadi himself points this out in one of his stories. He was travelling with some devout companions towards the Hijaz in Arabia. A boy near Beni Hilal Oasis started to sing in such a way that the camel of a scoffer of mysticism began to dance, then ran off into the desert. I commented, says the Sheikh, "Good sir, you remain unmoved, but that song has affected even an animal." This and other extracts are from Aga Omar Ali Shah's translation, M.S. His teaching about self-examination refers not only to the ordinary need to practice what one preaches. On the Sufi way, there must be a certain kind of self-examination. This comes at a stage earlier than that at which one can understand the admonitions of a teacher. If you will not reprove yourself, Saadi says, you will not welcome reproof from another. Such is the persistence of mechanical adulation of the retired life that a candidate for Sufi studies must first be informed as to the place of retirement. Fettered feet in the presence of friends is better than living in a garden with strangers, he remarks. Only under certain circumstances is withdrawal from the world needed. Anchorites, who are nothing more than professional obsessives, have given the impression that the desert or mountains are the places where the mystic must spend his whole life. They have mistaken a thread for the whole carpet. The importance of time and place in Sufi exercises is another matter which Saadi stresses. Ordinary intellectuals will be unable to believe that thought varies in quality and effectiveness in accordance with circumstances. They will plan a meeting for a certain time and place, will start an academic conversation and keep it going under any circumstances, insensitive to the Sufi cognition that only on occasion, according to the Sufi, can the human mind escape from the machine within which it revolves. This principle, familiar in ordinary life under the guise of "there is a time and place for everything," is stressed by the Gulistan in a typical manner. Tale 36 of the chapter on the manners of dervishes seems to be a mere exercise in moral instruction or etiquette. When expounded in the Sufi atmosphere, it reveals fresh dimensions. A dervish entered a house of a generous man and found an assembly of literati there. There was a constant interchange of pleasantries, and the air was thick with the results of intellectual exercise. Someone invited him to contribute. "You must accept from a smaller intellect only one couplet," said the dervish. The company implored him to speak. "Like a bachelor before the woman's bathhouse door, I face the table, hungry for food." The couplet means not only that this was a time for food, not talk, it also conveys that the intellectual prattling was merely a setting for real understanding. The story continues that the host at once said that very soon meatballs would be provided. "For the starving man," replied the dervish, "plain bread is meatball enough." Those who are impatient to learn without knowing that they are not fitted for learning Sufism in their crude state are often reprimanded by the Gulistan in stories and poetry. "How can the sleeper arouse the sleeper?" Saadi asks in a familiar Sufi phrase. While it may be true that a man's actions should accord with his words, it is also most true that the observer himself must be in a position to assess these actions. Most people are not. A conference of the wise is like the bazaar of the cloth sellers. In the latter place you cannot take away anything unless you pay money. In the former you can only carry away that for which you have the capacity. Many a learned man is destroyed by ignorance and the learning which is of no use to him. Hadrat Ahmed ibn Masud, the Sufi. The selfishness of the would-be disciple in seeking his own development and interests is another subject that is stressed among the Sufis. A balance has to be struck between wanting something for oneself and wanting it for the community as well. The link between the Sufis and the Brethren of Sincerity, hardly noticed by outside observers, is stressed in Saadi's section on this problem. The Brethren were a society of savants who prepared recensions of available knowledge and published them anonymously in the cause of education, none desirous of increasing his own repute through this dedication. Because they were a secret society, little was known about them. Because sincerity is associated with the Sufis, Sufi teachers were often asked about them. Saadi gives this lesson about the mysterious Brethren in Tale 43. A wise man was asked about the Brethren of Sincerity. He said, "Even the least among them honors the wishes of his companions above his own. As the wise say, a man engrossed in himself is neither brother nor kinsman." The place won by the Gulistan as a book of moral uplift invariably given to the literate young has had the effect of establishing a basic Sufic potential in the minds of its readers. Saadi is read and enjoyed because of his thoughts, his poems, the entertainment value of his books. In later years, when he comes to be affiliated to a Sufi teaching school, the inner dimensions of the tales can be revealed to the student. He has something upon which to build. This preparatory material is almost non-existent in other cultures. Secrets revealed prematurely, and there are some in Sufism which can actually be communicated without the whole of the teaching, can cause more harm than good. Unless the recipient is prepared, he can misuse the power of which the Sufis are guardians. Saadi explains this in a story which, overtly, is little more than the amplification of a well-worn proverb. A man had an ugly daughter. He married her to a blind man because nobody else would have her. A doctor offered to restore the blind man's sight, but the father would not allow him for fear that he would divorce his daughter. The husband of an ugly woman, concludes Saadi, is best blind. Generosity and liberality are two of the important factors which, when applied energetically and correctly, go to prepare the candidate for Sufihood. When it is said, "You get nothing free," there is very much more to it than that. The manner of giving, the thing which is given, the effect of the giving upon the individual, these are the factors which determine the progress of the Sufi. There is a strong link between the concept of persistence and bravery with that of liberality. In ordinary discipleship, as known in other systems, where the inner understanding of the mechanism of progress is in disarray, the disciple will think in terms of struggle. He gets nothing without struggle, he thinks, and he is encouraged to think in this way. But Saadi pinpoints the problems in one of his smaller aphorisms. A person, he says, went to a sage and asked whether it was better to be valorous or liberal. He answered, "He who is liberal does not have to be valorous." This is a most important aspect of Sufi training. It will also be noticed that the form in which the teaching is couched gives Saadi the extra possibility of pointing out, through the mouth of the sage, that questions put in a certain way, either or, are not necessarily to be answered in that way. In his chapter on the advantages of contentment, Saadi conceals Sufi teachings in several stories, which are seemingly aimed at those who do not exercise correct etiquette. A number of dervishes, reduced to an extremity of hunger, wanted to accept some food from an evil man, known for his liberality. Saadi himself advises them in a famous poem, "The lion does not eat the dog's leavings, though he die of hunger in his lair. Resign your bodies to starvation. Do not beg the base for favours." The way and position in which this story is given shows to the Sufi that Saadi is warning against the dervish following any attractive creed outside of his own, while he is in a period of trial consequent upon his Sufi dedication. The real Sufi has something within him which cannot be reduced in value by association with lesser men. Saadi has made this theme most attractive in one of his elegant moral tales, showing where real dignity resides. A king was hunting in a wilderness with some courtiers when it became very cold. He announced that they would sleep in a peasant's hovel until morning. The courtiers insisted that the monarch's dignity would suffer if he were to enter such a place. The peasant, however, said, "It is not your majesty who will lose, but I who will gain in dignity from being so honoured." The peasant received a robe of honour.